What if I told you that the person who spends 3 years perfecting their business plan but never launches, the writer who endlessly polishes the first chapter but never writes the second, the artist who has folders full of almost ready projects but nothing published? What if these people aren't actually perfectionists at all? What if there's something far more tragic? Here's a disturbing truth that will make you question everything you think you know about high achievers. The most paralyzed people on earth often appear to be the most dedicated. They're always busy, always improving, always just about to do something extraordinary, but they never do. Carl Jung discovered something that will chill you to the bone. He found that beneath the noble mask of perfectionism lies not a pursuit of excellence, but a terror so profound that most people would rather waste decades of their lives than face it for even a moment. The terror of discovering who they really are. You see, there's a dirty secret about human nature that nobody wants to admit. We're not actually afraid of failure, we're afraid of success. We're not running from our weaknesses, we're fleeing from our own power. And perfectionism? It's the most beautiful, socially acceptable prison ever invented, because here's what Jung realized that nobody else dared to say. The person who never starts because it's not perfect yet isn't protecting their work from criticism. They're protecting themselves from having to live up to their own potential. They're hiding from the devastating responsibility of being great. And if that sounds like someone you know, or someone you are, then everything you're about to hear will either set you free or make you very, very uncomfortable. The beautiful lie. We tell ourselves, beneath the seemingly admirable glow of perfectionism lurks a terror as profound as it is misunderstood, the dread of confronting our own capabilities. Most people assume that perfectionism signals discipline, unwavering dedication to quality, or elevated moral standards. Our culture, after all, celebrates those who refuse to settle for anything less than exceptional. But what if this entire narrative is merely an elaborate deception? What if beneath this relentless chase for flawlessness lies not strength, but profound vulnerability? An unconscious tactic to avoid confronting something far more terrifying, the authentic potential that dwells within each human soul? Carl Gustav Jung viewed perfectionism not as an inherent virtue, but as a sophisticated form of self-destruction. The human psyche, Jung observed, constructs elaborate facades, what he termed personas, to conceal aspects of the self it fears exposing to the world. In countless cases, perfectionism serves as precisely this kind of mask, a flawless exterior that shields the individual not merely from external criticism, but primarily from the overwhelming terror of accepting responsibility for their own magnificence. Consider someone who fantasizes about authoring a novel, founding a company, transforming their career path, or addressing a crowd. This individual invests years in research, strategizing, refining every element. Yet they never begin. They never take that crucial first step because something always remains inadequate. The manuscript lacks polish. The strategy needs strengthening. The concept requires further refinement. Days dissolve into months, months into years. Here, perfectionism has nothing to do with quality standards. It's rooted in fear, certainly fear of failure, but more devastatingly, fear of success. Because as Jung recognized, success carries with it the agonizing revelation that one could have accomplished far more, far sooner. Perfectionism generates what we might call elegant paralysis. The individual remains motionless while appearing industrious. They're perpetually working on something, perpetually enhancing details. Meanwhile, they avoid confronting the most dangerous question of all: what am I truly capable of achieving? The answer to that question is not only magnificent, it's also terrifying. Discovering one's authentic power means confronting lost time, squandered opportunities, and the immense responsibility that accompanies one's true strength. The Jungian perspective. When excellence becomes imprisonment, Jung argued that the shadow, the unconscious realm where desires, fears, and suppressed potentials reside, often contains precisely this unacknowledged greatness. When someone keeps it buried, they create socially acceptable justifications for never fully launching themselves into the world. Perfectionism ranks among the most socially celebrated traits. It's far more acceptable to declare, "I haven't begun because I want it flawless," than to confess, "I haven't begun because I'm terrified of what I might become." From Jung's analytical lens, perfectionism isn't merely an obsession with details, nor is it a refined quality that separates the exceptional from the ordinary. It's a deeply embedded psychological mechanism serving a specific function, protecting the ego from confronting internal content it's unprepared to integrate. Among this content often lies the individual's own inner strength. Jung observed that humans exist in perpetual tension between conscious awareness and unconscious content. Perfectionism occupies precisely this liminal space between the conscious mind that craves admiration and the unconscious that fears exposure. The obsession with executing everything impeccably becomes a plausible excuse to avoid concrete action. While perfecting something, one avoids genuine risks. But there's something even deeper at work here. Perfectionism feeds on the persona, the social mask each person constructs for world presentation. This mask seeks acceptance, approval, recognition. For the perfectionist, the persona becomes almost sacred, a hallowed space where everything must gleam without flaws. They need the world to perceive them as meticulous, dedicated, demanding of themselves. This irreproachable public image functions as armor. Behind this armor lies what Jung called the shadow. The shadow isn't merely a repository of flaws, traumas, or shameful memories. Jung went further, asserting that the shadow also harbors talents, desires, creative impulses, and above all, the individual's potential. Everything repressed not for being negative, but for being too magnificent for the current ego structure to handle. This is why many perfectionists deep down aren't just fleeing from making errors, they're fleeing from succeeding so overwhelmingly that their entire existence would require complete transformation. The terror of our own magnificence. Speaking of fearing one's own power may seem paradoxical initially. After all, who would consciously fear being powerful? Isn't that what everyone claims to desire? To be strong, successful, capable of transforming their lives and surroundings? But Carl Jung compels us to look beyond surface-level responses. For him, the fear of personal power isn't just real, it's one of the most profound and paralyzing fears humans experience. This terror emerges because authentic personal power isn't merely a source of fulfillment. It carries an enormous burden of responsibility. Recognizing who one truly is means accepting that one could have accomplished more, reached further, created or achieved extraordinary things. This realization proves psychologically devastating for many. In acknowledging their own power, a person must also confront wasted time, missed opportunities, dreams deferred under the excuse of insufficient perfection. Jung distinguished between what the ego consciously desires and what the self, the deepest core of the psyche, demands from us. The self calls us toward individuation, toward developing our fullest uniqueness. But this call is uncomfortable, sometimes painful, because it forces us beyond our comfort zones, compels us to abandon fragile, limited identities, and confront the unknown existing both within and beyond us. For many people, remaining small feels safer. Living below one's potential offers comfort, anonymity, reduced exposure. Excellence demands courage, not only to face external challenges, but primarily to handle others' scrutiny and the relentless judgment that often accompanies those who dare to shine. Society, despite claiming to value genius, frequently punishes those who stand out excessively. Those who appear too magnificent become targets of envy, suffocating expectations, even hostility. Furthermore, there's the weight of one's own shadow. Jung stated that everything we repress, including our greatness, ends up in the shadow. What remains there begins exerting unconscious influence over us. A person may unknowingly create situations where they sabotage their own projects, destroy promising relationships, or surrender at crucial moments, all to avoid bearing the weight of becoming who they could truly be. The shadow's secret, where our power hides. To understand why so many perfectionists remain trapped in endless cycles of idealization and immobility, we must explore one of Carl Jung's most fascinating and disturbing concepts, the shadow. When discussing the perfectionist's shadow, we're not just addressing flaws, vices, or ugly thoughts. We're primarily confronting repressed potential, hidden desires, and fears so profound they often never reach consciousness. Jung defined the shadow as everything the individual refuses to be, yet nonetheless is. These are aspects, qualities, impulses, abilities, and feelings banished from consciousness because they didn't fit the socially acceptable image, the persona each person constructs. In the perfectionist's case, the persona is impeccable, someone disciplined, detail-oriented, perpetually pursuing excellence. But behind this facade, the shadow may contain precisely the opposite: fear, insecurity, anger, envy, and ironically, magnificent talents repressed for seeming excessive or threatening. For Jung, repressing the shadow doesn't eliminate it. Conversely, everything denied and banished to the unconscious becomes more powerful, exerting silent influence over thoughts, behaviors, and decisions. Perfectionism can thus be viewed as a highly sophisticated defense mechanism. By maintaining obsessive focus on details, the individual keeps the shadow contained, preventing its contents from surfacing and forcing confrontation with uncomfortable self-truths. Here lies the paradox. The perfectionist believes they're in control, working diligently to achieve optimal outcomes. In reality, they're controlled by the fear residing in their shadow, by anxiety about exposure, criticism, shining too brightly, or failing spectacularly. Within the perfectionist's shadow dwell not only the flaws they fear showing, but also their greatness. Many don't realize that the greater fear isn't making mistakes, but hitting the target perfectly, because realizing one's potential means launching into the world without shields, dealing with envy, the weight of expectations, and the need to maintain results. Above all, it means acknowledging that all time spent hiding was, in part, precious waste. Jung believed immense life force exists in the shadow. Everything we repress, including talents, creativity, and boldness, remains there, accumulating energy. This energy, finding no healthy expression outlet, begins manifesting dysfunctionally. Chronic anxiety, panic attacks, compulsions, extreme procrastination. This is why many perfectionists live in permanent tension. They carry within them a dormant volcano ready to erupt. The hidden cost of perfect paralysis. Perfectionism, viewed externally, appears virtuous. Many associate it with pursuing excellence, dedication, commitment to impeccable results. But those living within this armor know the psychological cost is devastating. For Carl Gustav Jung, everything kept repressed or unlived extracts a price. In the perfectionist case, this cost often manifests as anxiety, guilt, paralysis, and chronically dissatisfying life, despite often appearing successful to the world. One of perfectionism's greatest traps is the constant illusion of being almost ready. The individual always stands one step away from starting, launching, exposing themselves, but never arrives. This eternal waiting for the perfect moment drains vital energy. Jung termed this psychic stagnation. Energy that should fuel action, creation, and transformation becomes trapped in an internal whirlpool, spinning without finding exit. There's also deep suffering caused by relentless self-criticism. The perfectionist not only seeks to execute everything impeccably, but torments themselves over every minimal, real, or imagined failure. Small mistakes become internal catastrophes, eroding self-esteem. Jung warned that the ego, when hypertrophied and overly identified with the persona, this perfect social image, cannot tolerate imperfections because each failure threatens the identity constructed with such effort. The result is an individual living in constant fear of being unmasked, as if at any moment everyone would discover they're not as competent, intelligent, or disciplined as they appear. But perhaps perfectionism's highest cost is existential. Jung said living below one's potential inevitably generates suffering. The perfectionist may gain external recognition but often carries emptiness. They feel perpetually behind what they could have been. The problem is that admitting this would mean accepting that years, sometimes decades, have been wasted in pursuit of an impossible ideal. Another devastating consequence is the toxic relationship with failure. The perfectionist doesn't view mistakes as learning opportunities, but as proof of inadequacy. Each failure is experienced as a mortal blow to identity, generating paralyzing fear. This mindset hinders not only personal growth, but creativity itself. Innovation requires experimentation, risk-taking, accepting that many attempts will be imperfect. The Jungian path, from prison to power. If there's something distinguishing Carl Gustav Jung from many other psychological thinkers, it's his radically transformative view of human suffering. For Jung, symptoms, anxiety, compulsions, blockages aren't just problems to eliminate, but messages from the unconscious, sometimes brutal invitations for individuals to discover something essential about themselves. In perfectionism's case, the message is clear. There's inner power being suffocated, an unlived life demanding to finally surface. Jung didn't view perfectionism as moral failure. He understood it as legitimate psychic defense created to protect the ego from confronting internal content that still seems too great, too dangerous to face. But he also warned that if this defense crystallizes, it transforms into prison. The key to escaping this prison lies in the process he called individuation, the path by which individuals become what they are in essence. It's the process of integrating all psychic parts, including those repressed, denied, or projected onto others. Here's the crucial point. For Jung, the goal isn't eliminating the shadow or forcefully ridding oneself of perfectionism. It's to integrate, transform, make previously blocked energies serve conscious life. In the perfectionist's case, this means recognizing that the drive for excellence isn't inherently negative. The desire to perform well can be an extraordinary force capable of generating valuable works, bold projects, impressive achievements. The problem arises when this force becomes tyrannical, demanding absolute perfection and paralyzing action. The Jungian path, therefore, isn't destroying perfectionism, but transforming it from something rigid and paralyzing into something flexible and creative. Jung believed this process begins with courage, looking at the shadow, asking oneself without masks, what am I avoiding by seeking so much perfection? For many, the answer is devastating. They're avoiding discovering what they're truly capable of, avoiding the responsibility of using their talent, voice, power. Another central aspect of Jungian thought is accepting imperfection as part of the creative process. Jung asserted that growth occurs in the territory of error, of trying, of learning. Those waiting to be perfect before acting never accomplish anything significant because perfection is inherently unattainable. There's a powerful principle from Jungian thought. Freedom begins the moment you accept that your first attempt will be imperfect. Freedom is born when individuals accept that first drafts will be flawed, that initial videos won't be brilliant, that first attempts may fail, and that's acceptable. In this space of imperfection, true creativity resides. There we find original ideas, innovations, authentic works carrying individuals' unique marks, breaking free, practical steps to liberation. After exploring the psyche's depths, perhaps the most crucial question remains, what do I do now? Because intellectually, understanding that perfectionism is fear isn't sufficient. Knowing that latent power hides beneath layers of demands and self-criticism is also inadequate. Action is required. The truth is simple but painful. As long as someone waits for the perfect moment, perfect idea, or perfect execution, life passes by. Perfectionism robs not only external opportunities but the chance to discover who you truly are. Jung said suffering arises not from living difficult lives but from living lives that aren't ours. Perfectionism, in this sense, is an elegant trap, keeping many people stuck in small, safe, deeply unsatisfying existences. Here are concrete practices inspired by Jungian psychology and modern applied techniques. First, act before you're ready. Initial impulse should come from action, not thought. If writing text, complete the draft without worrying about perfection. If you have a project, launch it even if it's not the final version. Jung believed the self can only fully emerge when lived in the real world, not just contemplated mentally. Second, set clear preparation limits. Give yourself short, almost uncomfortable deadlines for planning. Then commit to acting, because each additional preparation day feeds the illusion that you're still inadequate. Perfection isn't in endless preparation but in courage to correct as you proceed. Third, begin dialoguing with your shadow. When feeling fear, shame or blockage, instead of fleeing, sit and write, what am I really afraid of here? What's the worst that could happen if I do this imperfectly? Often just naming fear diminishes its power. Fourth, accept that first versions of anything will be imperfect, and that's okay. Jung said, psychic energy needs flow. When we block it, it becomes anguish. Better to produce something imperfect than remain paralyzed. Fifth, develop small conscious victories against perfectionism. Choose something simple to do deliberately in a good enough way. It could be writing text without obsessive revision, recording video without dozens of retakes, or simply allowing yourself to submit something 80% good. Each such victory creates new neural connections challenging the paralysis cycle. Finally, remember that imperfect action always surpasses perfect inaction. This is one of the greatest truths Jung indirectly bequeathed us. We're transformed not by thought but by action. Perfectionism makes it seem like you're being careful, discerning, responsible, but often it's just fear dressed as virtue. Jung calls us to something much greater, to be whole even in imperfection, because it's precisely in the vulnerability of real action that our true power resides. So here's the invitation. What are you postponing in perfectionism's name? What project are you waiting to finish? What idea remains stuck on paper? What fear paralyzes you? Shine light on your shadow. You'll realize you're not alone. And if this exploration has brought deep reflections, remember, each piece of this knowledge forms the path to something greater, the liberation of your own magnificence.